I am 73 years old. It took me exactly 50 years to understand that the most expensive thing you can ever own is a life you were unactually present for. Look around this room. Look at the heavy mahogany desk, the leather-bound books that have never been read twice, and the awards catching dust on the shelves. This is what society calls success. This is what I spent 40 years of my life building. I thought I was constructing a fortress for my family. But now, in the twilight of my days, I realize I was only building a very expensive cage for myself. My name is Peter. For 41 years, I was married to Susan. We were the perfect couple. No scandals, no loud arguments, just a steady, predictable rhythm of a life well managed. I provided the house, the cars, the safety. I met every minimum requirement of a good husband. I was faithful. I was reliable. I was always there physically. But there is a profound difference between being in the room and being in the moment. Now, the silence in this house isn't just a lack of noise. It is a weight. It is the crushing sound of 4 decades of missed conversations and promises that I would do better later. I realized too late that while I was busy planning for a someday that never arrived, the present was quietly packing its bags and leaving the room. I was right about the finances. I was right about the career. But I was close to no one. If you are still young enough to change your tomorrow, listen closely. Because being adequate is just a slow, polite way of dying while you are still breathing. I built a kingdom, and I named it Provision. I convinced myself that every late night at the office, every missed dinner, and every skipped school play was a brick in the foundation of my family's happiness. I was an architect, you see. I was designing a future so bright that it blinded me to the darkness creeping into my present. My briefcase was my shield. My phone was my weapon. I treated my home like a refueling station, a place to sleep, to wash, and to prepare for the next battle in the corporate world. I remember the silence of the hallways when I would return at midnight. I would stand outside my children's bedroom doors, listening to their steady breathing, and tell myself that my absence was the price of their comfort. I was buying them the best schools, the safest neighborhood, and the most expensive toys. But you cannot buy a memory. You cannot deposit a father's hug into a savings account. I was so busy being a provider that I forgot to be a person. I was building a wall of gold, and I didn't realize that I was on the wrong side of it. I thought my family understood. I thought they knew it was all for them. But love doesn't speak the language of balance sheets and quarterly reports. Love speaks the language of time. And time was the only thing I refused to give. I was successful, yes. But I was building a monument to a man who was slowly becoming a stranger in his own hallways. Later, it is such a small, harmless-sounding word. But in my house, it became a subtle poison. It was the shield I used against true intimacy. Susan would suggest things, simple things. A walk after dinner to watch the sunset. A dance class she saw advertised in the paper. Just 20 minutes to talk about our dreams instead of our schedules. And I always had the same reasonable answer. Not tonight, Susan, I had a long day. I'm tired, maybe later. I truly believed later existed. I thought of time as a vast, inexhaustible bank account where I could keep making withdrawals without ever checking the balance. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was just comfortable. And comfort is the enemy of deep connection. I traded the vibrant, messy reality of a shared life for the quiet predictability of a routine. I postponed joy. I postponed passion. I thought I was saving them for some future perfect time when work slowed down. I didn't realize that today was the only time we ever really had. Later is the most expensive luxury in the world, and I bought it every single day until I went bankrupt. I was a good husband. That is what I told myself for 40 years. I never cheated. I never raised my voice in anger. I never walked away when things got difficult. In the eyes of the law and the neighbors, I was beyond reproach. I was adequate. But now, in this empty house, I know that adequacy is the lowest possible bar a man can set for himself. It is the participation trophy of a marriage. I lived with Susan like a polite tenant. We discussed the mortgage. We coordinated the grocery list with precision. We planned the holidays with the cold efficiency of a business merger. But we stopped being curious about each other. I stopped asking what she was dreaming about when she stared out the kitchen window. I stopped trying to make her laugh. I assumed that as long as I wasn't doing anything wrong, I was doing everything right. What a foolish, arrogant lie. You can be perfectly right and still be completely alone. I was providing a house, but I was neglecting the home. I was a reliable provider, but I was an absent soul. I was a man of my word, but my words were only about logistics, never about the heart. I was adequate, and adequacy is a slow, silent death for love. It doesn't scream. It just fades until there is nothing left but the furniture. Susan was a quiet force. She adapted to my laters and my not tonights so well that I didn't even notice the transition. She stopped asking for the dance. She stopped suggesting the pottery class. She built a life around my absence. She found her own friends, her own hobbies, and her own world. And I was so arrogant that I saw this as a sign of a stable marriage. I thought she was content. I didn't see the quiet mourning of the woman I had promised to love. I lived with her for decades, yet I knew less about her than her bridge club friends did. I saw her every morning across the breakfast table, but I wasn't looking at her soul. I was looking at the woman who made sure my shirts were ironed and the social calendar was clear. She became part of the architecture of my life, reliable, necessary, but invisible. Like the air I breathed, I only noticed her importance when she started to slip away. I had replaced intimacy with logistics. I assumed that because we shared a roof, we shared a life. But we were just two ships docked in the same harbor, never actually sailing together. I didn't realize that by being so occupied with myself, I was effectively making her a widow while I was still standing right in front of her. It was a Tuesday in March when the world finally stopped waiting for me. Susan had been tired. A dull ache in her side, she said. I told her it was probably nothing. I told her we would see a professional next week. After my quarterly review, I was still trying to schedule life as if I held the pen. But the diagnosis didn't care about my calendar. Pancreatic cancer, for months. That was the new math of my existence. March to July. Suddenly, the decades of later I had accumulated were compressed into a handful of weeks. The meetings that seemed so urgent on Monday became meaningless by Tuesday morning. The someday I had promised her for 20 years vanished into thin air. There was no more later. There was only now, and now was terrifyingly brief. I sat by her bed, and for the first time in 40 years, I really looked at her. I didn't see the woman who managed my home or the mother of my children. I saw a soul preparing to depart, and I realized with a sickening thud in my chest that I was a stranger to the person who was saying goodbye. We had a deadline, and I was holding a book of blank pages. I had all the money in the world, and I couldn't buy a single extra hour. The hospice room was small, white, and smelled of antiseptic and stolen time. In those final weeks, the man of success was reduced to a man of silence. I sat by her bed, holding her hand a hand that felt like parchment, fragile and cold. We talked more in those 4 months than we had in the previous 20 years, but it wasn't the kind of talk I was used to. There were no plans, no logistics, no schedules, just raw, terrifying honesty. One night, the air in the room felt particularly heavy. Susan looked at me, her eyes clouded with pain, but sharper than they had ever been. She whispered a sentence that shattered the foundation of my entire life. She said, "Peter, we wasted so much time being right instead of being close." I wanted to argue. My instinct was to list all the things I had done right for her. I wanted to defend my record as a provider and a husband. But the words died in my throat. Looking into her eyes, I finally saw the truth. My need to be correct, my adherence to routine, my sensible reasons for saying no, they were all just bricks in a wall I had built between us. I had won every argument, but I had lost the heart of the woman I loved. I was right about the budget, right about the career, right about the logical way to live. But I was standing in the ruins of a connection I had neglected to feed. I was the winner of an empty room. After the funeral, the house didn't just feel empty. It felt like a crime scene where the only thing stolen was time. I began the agonizing task of going through her things. In the bottom drawer of her nightstand, tucked behind a stack of old magazines, I found them. 3 leather-bound journals. I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed we had shared for 4 decades, and I began to read. Within 10 pages, I realized that I had spent my life living with a woman I didn't actually know. The journals weren't about me. Not really. They were about her. Her dreams of seeing the mist over the Isle of Skye. Her secret sketches of birds she saw in the garden. Her profound, aching loneliness. She wrote about the polite silence of our dinners. She wrote about how she had stopped trying to reach me, not because she stopped loving me, but because she was tired of hitting a wall of maybe later. Reading her words was like being a ghost in my own home. I was physically present in every entry, yet I was emotionally 1,000 miles away. I saw myself through her eyes, a man who provided everything but gave nothing. I was the architect of a house that she lived in, but she was the only one trying to make it a home. I held the journal to my chest and cried, not for her death, but for the life she had lived right next to me while I was too busy to notice. Tucked into the back of her final journal was a folded, yellowed map of the Scottish Highlands. She had traced a route in red ink, small, hopeful circles around villages I had never heard of and coastal roads I had always deemed too far away. I remember the year she bought that map. It was 1998. She had brought it to dinner, her eyes bright with excitement, talking about the mist over the glens and the history of her ancestors. And I, the man of reason, had folded that map and put it aside. I told her it was too expensive. I told her the firm needed me. I told her we would go when things settled down. Things never settled down. I just got older, and she just got sicker. It would have cost me 1 week of my time and a fraction of what I spent on this mahogany desk. It was such a small price for her joy, yet I was too poor in spirit to pay it. Now, I sit in this room and I can almost hear the wind from those highlands she never saw. It is a cold, haunting sound. It is the sound of a yes that arrived 25 years too late. I have the money now. I have all the time in the world. I could fly there tomorrow. I am surrounded by the ghosts of the trips we never took and the dances we never had. My success bought me this silence, and it is a bitter trade. I am 73 years old, and I live in a museum of my own making. Every piece of furniture, every expensive painting, and every award on the wall is a reminder of a victory that feels like a defeat. I built a life that looked magnificent from the outside, but it was hollow at the core. I was so busy being the architect of my career that I became the spectator of my own marriage. On my desk, I keep a photograph from our honeymoon in 1972. Susan is laughing, her hair blowing in the wind, her eyes filled with a hope that I slowly extinguished with years of benign neglect. She was right. We wasted so much time being right instead of being close. We traded the messy, beautiful reality of connection for the sterile comfort of adequacy. Don't make my mistake. Love is not a feeling that stays alive on its own. It is a choice you make every morning. It is choosing to be curious about your partner even after 40 years. It is having the hard conversations instead of the easy silences. It is saying yes to the dance, yes to the walk, and yes to the trip, even when you are tired. If you are listening to this, you still have the one thing I would give all my success to have back. You have time. Your partner is still there. Your children are still young enough to remember your presence. Don't wait for a diagnosis to start living. Don't wait for a hospice room to start being honest. Go to your version of Scotland while you can still see it together, because one day you will be sitting where I am, and the only thing that will matter isn't what you achieved, but who you loved and how well they knew it. Don't be right. Be close.